We began filming a series in England called The Synagogues of Satan. And I did the introductory one in England. But I want to do another aspect of it here, of the same series, in Melbourne. It is a tragedy when the truth is disallowed as evidence in a court. But in this state, Judge Michael Higgins disallowed the truth. Quoting directly from the Quran and the Hadith was not allowed in the defense of the Christians who were convicted of religious vilification. Therefore, because free speech is no longer allowed in this state, and it has been decided by politicians and a judge that just as Muslims deprive Christians of freedom of speech in Muslim countries, they should also be able to deprive us of freedom of speech in this country. And just as there is no Muslim country that will give Christians or Jews the rights they demand in Australia or Israel or America or Britain, they have rights we don't. I have to preface matters by saying I'm not trying to vilify Muslims or encourage hatred against Islam. I just want to quote from their own literature. I'm simply going to quote from the Hadith and from the Quran. That's all. I'm quoting from the Hadith and the Quran. But I would like to ask Muslims some questions. I'm simply putting this out as a question. My first question is this. How can you expect anyone to believe the following: that somebody was a prophet of God? They are the greatest prophet of God. That there is no prophet greater than they are, and God has had no greater or no higher spokesman than this person. What would you say of somebody who at the age of approximately 53 or 54 married a little girl at the age of 6, and at the age of 9, when she was playing on a swing, you come to her, give her a glass of milk, and take her to your bed and take her virginity? What do we call a 53 or 54-year-old man who has sex with a little girl at the age of 9? Do we call him a prophet of God? We don't. I'd like to invite my Islamic friends to please explain the following. In the Hadith, Bukhari, Volume 5, number 234, narrated by Aisha. Aisha was the daughter of Abu Bakr. Mohammed the Prophet was engaged to me when I was a girl 6 years old. I was playing in a swing with some of my girlfriends. Unexpectedly, Allah's apostle came to me in the afternoon, and my mother handed me over to him. At that time, I was a girl of 9 years of age. And Bukhari, Volume 5, number 236, the Prophet married Aisha when she was a girl of 6 years old and consummated that marriage when she was 9. Islam is a religion that teaches Muhammad was a pedophile. That is what their religion teaches. I, as a Christian, am not calling Muhammad a pedophile. No Jew ever called Muhammad a pedophile. Muslims call Muhammad a pedophile. That is what their religion teaches. This man had sex with Aisha, the daughter of Abu Bakr, when she was a little girl. He was a middle-aged man. Can you please explain to me why, since your religion in the Hadith teaches your prophet was a pedophile, how can you expect any Western person, any Christian, any Jew, anybody, to believe that a man who would have sex with a little girl is the greatest prophet? How can we believe such a man was a holy man? Now again, I'm not trying to incite hatred against Muslims. I'm not trying to blaspheme your religion. I'm not trying to insult your prophet. I'm simply saying what your religion teaches. Your religion teaches that this man had sex with a little girl. Can you please explain to me why I should believe a man who had sex with a little girl is God's greatest prophet? I can't find any Muslims who will explain this to me. I've been to the Persian Gulf, I've been to Morocco, I've been to Turkey, I've been to Indonesia, I've been to Malaysia, I've been from one end of the Muslim world to the other. I've talked to Muslims in London and America, I've talked to Muslims a lot of places. Can one of you please tell me how you can believe a man who would do such a thing is the greatest prophet of God, and why I should believe he's the greatest prophet of God? What do you want to do? Kill me or kill somebody for quoting from your own book? I didn't write that book. That's your book. It's not my book. I'm simply reading your literature. What do you want to do? Hate me for reading your book? I'm only reading your book. It's your book, not mine. Don't hate me. Don't try to kill me for reading your book. You wrote it. I didn't write it. It's not my book. Christians didn't write this. It's your book. What do you want to do? Hate me for writing it? Kill me because I read something in your book? If you find it offensive, why do you believe it? Please answer me the question. If you want to look it up in your book, it's in the Hadith. Bukhari, Volume 5, numbers 234 and 236. Your religion teaches Mohammed had sex with a little girl. I'd like to ask you another question. The Quran tells us a lot of things. Now remember, when Europe was in the Dark Ages, Islam had its golden age. Only then, it was not a fundamentalist Islam, it was a philosophical Islam that was highly westernized. It was ruled not by the Saudi Wahhabi, not by the Wahhabists of Saudi Arabia that fund the construction of Islamic institutions all over the world, all over the Western world, that breed radicalism. While governments like Australia, Britain, and America allow the Saudis to finance the construction of mosques all over our countries, they will not allow one church to be built in theirs. Can you please explain to me the following? Europe was in the Dark Ages under the medieval papacy. I'm not a Roman Catholic, I'm just a Christian. But in Islamic civilization, you could have written a check in Morocco and cashed it in Baghdad. They were at the forefront of philosophy, science, mathematics, certainly medicine, literature. Islam was at the forefront of architecture. In fact, many of the influences of the Renaissance came back with the Crusades that became the Renaissance, not just from the Byzantine world or the Hindu world, but from the Muslim world. During its golden age, when it was something, it was not dominated by Arabs, it was dominated politically and strategically by Turks mainly, which eventually became the Ottoman Empire. And it was a philosophical Islam that was based intellectually and theologically in Cairo, mainly. It was a relatively benevolent religion by the standards of the time. Although there was always anti-Semitism, they still treated the Jews better than the Catholics did in Spain. It was a Muslim sultan in Turkey that gave the Jews refuge from the Roman Catholics during the Inquisition. And the suicide bombers then were not Muslims. Those Muslims would have seen sending children as suicide bombing to be barbarian. The suicide bombers sending children to die in suicide attacks then were not Muslims. It was the Roman Catholic Crusades, the Children's Crusade under St. Bernard. No wonder they named a dog after him. Given the fact that you people want to revive Islam as a world culture as a player on the global stage, as something that is post-colonial and now a force to be reckoned with again, politically, economically, culturally, strategically. Why are you running in the wrong direction? When Islam amounted to something other than something backward. It was westernized, and it was philosophical. It was not fundamentalist, and it was not radical. In fact, when they tried to go radical, they were defeated by the Khazar Empire. They were defeated twice in Vienna. They were defeated by Charles Martel. Anytime they became radicalized, they lost. When they were civilized, they defeated the Crusades at the Battle of the Horns of Hattin under Saladin. Then it was the Crusades who were the barbarians, especially the Knights Templar. Why are you running the opposite direction? Why are there so many Muslims today following fundamentalism when it was fundamentalism that kept your people and your society and your culture backward and ignorant? It was a westernized, philosophical, relatively tolerant Islam that saw your civilization blossom. Now, if I was a Western imperialist, which I'm not, the best thing that could happen to Muslims is to be fundamentalist, because that's going to keep them backward. But if they westernized, if they went back to the way they were during their golden age, they would emerge as a world power again. Look at Japan. Japan is an Eastern culture. Japan is a country that is in no way Western. But it realized for Japan to be an economic superpower, for Japan to be a player on the global stage, they had to listen to MacArthur and westernize. There was a man called Ataturk. He was the founder of modern Turkey. Ataturk realized that for Islam to revive, it had to separate religion from politics. It had to do what Japan did. Have an Oriental culture. Peoples can have their own religion, but it had to have a westernized system of government and economy. Otherwise, Turkey would remain backward and stinking, he thought. But unfortunately, fundamentalist Islam has grown in Turkey, and Turkey has remained what Ataturk said it should not be. You're running the wrong direction. If you want your people, your nations to amount to something, can you please explain to me why you are following fundamentalists if you are one of those Muslims who do that? It is sure to keep you backward. You will never be what America, Australia, Europe, and Britain and Japan are. Never, because you're going the wrong way. Can you please explain to me the logic of your fundamentalism? When you were fundamentalist, you lost. And then Europe overtook you with the Renaissance. Then the West became the leaders, economically, politically, strategically, culturally. You disintegrated. Can you answer me that question? But I have another question. I'd like to ask this question. If Islam is a religion of peace and tolerance, why is it that you have no democracy anywhere except where it's been imposed by the West? And can you please tell me one Muslim country that will give Christians and Jews the rights you have in Australia, in Britain, in Europe, in America, or even in Israel? Show me one. If you're a religion of peace and tolerance, can you please explain to me? I'm only asking the question, why is there 2.3 million dead Christians in Sudan? Why were 300,000 Christians massacred by the Muslims in East Timor? Why, please, are there 65,000 dead in the southern Philippines? Why 30,000 or so murdered in the Moluccan Islands? Why 40 to 50,000 murdered in Eritrea? Why 60,000 murdered in northern Nigeria, etc.? Why, if it is a religion based on peace and tolerance, were there thousands of people behaving like barbarians, rioting in the streets of London, England, demanding the murder of a British citizen, himself a Muslim, for writing a book? Can you please answer? I'm only asking the question. If you're a religion of peace and tolerance, where does peace and tolerance exist in the Muslim world today? I only want to know. You're telling me it's a religion of peace and tolerance? I've heard that and heard that and heard that, but all I've seen on the news is suicide attacks. I'm tired of hearing. Please show me. I just want to see it. It's reasonable. Why is there 3 times as many conflicts in today's world involving Islam as all the other religio people groups put together? Why? Why in one country in Europe like Denmark, 4% of the population are Muslims, but 40% of the people on the dole are Muslims, and the overwhelming majority of convicted rapists are Muslims, while their victims are overwhelmingly Danish? That's just one example. Why was Theo van Gogh murdered? For making a film about human rights in the Muslim world in Amsterdam. Why? Can you please explain to me? If you are a religion of peace and tolerance, why? Now, I'm told this is a small minority. Fine. If it's a small minority, please show me mainstream Islam. Show me one country that is democratic in your world. Show me one country that will give me the freedom as a Christian that we give you in America, Britain, and Australia. Just show me one. Fair question. I'm not attacking. I'm asking the question. Let me ask you this. We have people saying Christianity is a white man's religion. They are looking for converts from the black communities around the world. There are traditions in Islam that said Mohammed owned black slaves. Some would perhaps dispute this. It is without dispute that he called black people raisin heads. But here is my question. Why is it that if Christianity is a white man's religion, the first countries to abolish slavery were Christian? The last countries to abolish slavery are Muslim, except they haven't abolished it yet. Go on the website Anti-Slavery International. See where slavery is still practiced. Chad, Mauritania, Niger, Sudan. Rich Muslims with poor black slaves today, 2005. One man in Chad has 7,000 slaves. Just look on the human rights websites. Look on the women's rights websites. No, I don't agree with homosexuality, but look on the homosexual rights websites. Please show me the tolerance. I just want to know where it is, since that's what you're always telling us. It's only a question. If it's only a small minority, show me one place. Where's the majority? I've looked at your world. I've been to many Muslim countries. I've been to many. From Asia to North Africa to the Middle East, I've been to many Muslim countries. Maybe I didn't visit the right ones. Please show me where the tolerance is. America fought a civil war. 1 out of every 8 people in the northern states, 1 out of every 8 adult males were killed or wounded fighting a war that saw the abolition of slavery. Why did the Christian nations abolish it? Why has Islam not abolished it? It is a fair question. Slavery is the ultimate social evil. Why do you still have it? Fair question. I'm not trying to insult you. I'm only asking the question. Why do you do that to black people in Islamic countries? The leaders of the civil rights causes were at least nominally Christian. Martin Luther King was a Baptist minister. Desmond Tutu says he's an Anglican bishop. Civil rights movement, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, these things came from Christianity. The abolitionist movement in the United States came from Christianity. People like Charles Finney preached against slavery. In England, William Wilberforce, the Earl of Shaftesbury, the Methodists opposed slavery and brought about the laws that abolished it. Christian nations got rid of it. Rich Muslims, rich Arab Muslims buying black slaves. Here's another question. I notice that Muslims have to be hygienic and they have these washing rituals. In Bukhari, volume 4, number 516, in the Hadith, we read, Satan stays in the upper part of the nose all night. Muslim, volume 1, number 462, Abu Hurairah reported, the Apostle of Allah said, when any one of you awakes from sleep and performs ablution, washing rituals, he must cleanse his nose 3 times, for the devil spends the night in the interior of the nose. Do you really believe that the devil sleeps in your nose at night? That's why you have to clean your nose 3 times when you wake up. I'm not trying to mock, I'm simply asking the question. That's what it says in the Hadith. It's a fair question. It's what you people claim to believe. I want to know, do you really believe this? And do you expect me to believe it? Fair question. I'm only asking questions. That's all. I'm asking you reasonable, intelligent questions about your religion based on what's in your books. I have a lot of questions like that. Remember, Arabs invented digits, numbers. Greeks, Romans, they used letters. Hebrews used letters for numbers. Arabs were very good mathematicians during the Middle Ages. Good astronomers, good scientists. They weren't always backward. It was fundamentalism that brought the ignorance in being backward. Given the fact that you people invented numbers, you did. You invented digits. I assume you know how to count. And I would assume that God knows how to count. Miriam in Hebrew is Mary, the mother of Jesus. 1st century A.D. Miriam, the sister of Moses, was 13th century B.C. Why does your holy book say that Miriam, the sister of Moses, and Mary, the mother of Jesus, are the same Miriam? Now, I believe in a God of miracles. You believe in a God of miracles. I actually believe that Methuselah lived to be over 900 years old. But actually, don't you think 1,300 years old is kind of old to have a baby? I'm only asking the question. How can they be the same woman when they lived 13 centuries apart? Or for that matter, how can Haman from the book of Esther in ancient Persia, an Agagite, a descendant of Amalek, have been a court official in Pharaoh's Egypt? You got a problem. Haman, the Persian Empire, that was 5th century. Pharaoh was 13th century. Quite a discrepancy. 800 years difference. Yes, counting. Europe was backwards in medicine. They actually had barbers practicing bloodletting. It was stupidity. There was no pharmacology, no medicine in any modern sense. That was to a large degree pioneered by Arab physicians and Jewish physicians who lived in the Arab world. All the way to the Middle Ages, European medicine based human anatomy on the pig. Not until Harvey proposed the theory of circulation and was able to give evidence for it did they even understand circulation. They had no real concept of anatomy. Autopsy, post-mortem dissection, gross anatomy, that wasn't even legal to dissect a corpse in Europe. However, in the Hadith, Muslim Volume 3, Numbers 5113, Chapter 862, a believer, a Muslim, eats in one intestine, whereas a non-Muslim eats in 7 intestines. Ibn Ummah reported Allah's Messenger as saying that a non-Muslim eats in 7 intestines, while a Muslim eats in 1. Christians, Jews, Buddhists, Hindus, Jainists, Taoists, these people have 7 sets of intestines. Muslims have 1, according to your religion. In my wayward youth, it so happens I studied anatomy and physiology in some depth. I've seen dead corpses. I've seen dead embryos. I've seen dead everything. But I've yet to find a single cadaver that had 7 intestines. Can you please explain to me, given the fact that philosophical Islam were pioneers of medical science, trying to push forward into a modern age when Europe was still backward, how you can believe this? I guarantee you, if anyone studied medicine or pharmacology at a university in any Muslim country, and he put down on an exam paper that there are people who have 7 intestines, they wouldn't let him graduate. He would not be performing surgery in a hospital, he'd be sweeping the floor. Can you please explain this to me? I can't understand it. I only want to know. That's all. It's a fair question. Can you explain something else to me, please? Your religion has a surat called Ummah, where it says, Muslims are one nation and one people. One. Notice something. In the Judean Christian world, in the Western world, no 2 democracies have ever had a war. Whenever there was a war in the Christian world, or the Christianized world, I'm using the term Christian broadly, at least one of those countries was not democratic. They were fascist, they were Nazi, they were something like that. But never have any 2 democracies had a war. Never. Yet, the Wahhab came to power, bringing the House of Saud to the throne in Saudi Arabia through what they called a jihad, the costliest war in terms of human life since the Second World War was the war between Iran and Iraq. 1.5 million Muslims killed by other Muslims in what their religious leaders called a jihad. Jihad of Muslims killing other Muslims. Why did Iraq invade Kuwait? Why did the Kuwaitis massacre the Palestinian Arabs? Why is it, please, that when Arafat and the Palestinian Arabs tried on the Jordanians what they tried on the Israelis in Black September of 1970 in 12 days, the Jordanians systematically massacred between 15 and 18,000 so-called Palestinians in 12 days. Why do the Polisarios fight the Moroccans? Why? The tragedy of what happened to the Kurds. Why? Why is there no Ummah? Why is it that Islam cannot deliver historically what it promises? Ummah. No two Judeo-Christian democracies have ever had a war. Can you please explain to me, how come your religion doesn't seem to work? I'd like to know. Australia is not going to have a war with France. America is not going to have a war with Norway. Israel is not going to have a war with Canada. But Iran will have a war with Iraq. Kuwait had a war with Saudi Arabia. Egypt almost had a war with Libya. Jordanians had a war with the Palestinians. The Turks enslaved the Arab nations. Please explain to me why you don't have Ummah, why it is only the Judeo-Christian democracies that have been able to prevent war. Islam has not been able to. Can you explain it to me? It is a fair question. I'm only asking. And again, I'm not out to insult anybody. But I do feel insulted. I feel insulted when I read the following. In Bukhari, volume 4, chapter 32, page 415, the statement of Allah, and asked them, O Mohammed, about the town that was by the sea when they transgressed in the matter of the Sabbath, when their fish came to them only on the Sabbath day and did not become monkeys, despised and rejected. A tribe of Israelites became lost. The Jews were transformed into rats. Have you ever noticed that rats will drink milk from a sheep but not from a she-camel? This proves that Jews are transformed into rats. Then Jews transformed into pigs as well as rats. Bukhari, volume 4, number 524, page 333. Why is it that if somebody says Islam is a religion of violence in Victoria State that are prosecuted by the government, while your bookshops can sell literature urging the murder of the infidel, the non-Muslim, and make racial statements against other faiths? Can you please explain to me why the tsunami claimed victims who were 90% Muslims, but 90% of the aid came from the Christian world? Despite the fact that Saudi Arabian and Gulf state oil revenues doubled in the previous year, why did their aid come from the Christians instead of from the Muslims? It's a fair question. Does this prove that Christianity is morally superior to Islam? I'm only asking the question. With the doubling of oil revenues, shouldn't they have given more than chicken feed? Those helicopters came from the States. More money was raised at one benefit in the Sydney Opera House than was raised from the entire Islamic community in one of the Gulf states. There was some imams who said it was a judgment because of decadence on the Western tourists in Thailand. Thailand lost between 5,000 and 6,000 people, some of them Muslim, and only half of them Westerners, mainly Swedish. How many did Indonesia lose? tens of thousands, nearly all of them Muslims. If it was a judgment, as some imams say, a judgment from God, isn't he rather mad at Islam? I'm only asking the question. I simply want to know. I read your literature. I read your Quran. I read the Hadith. I read all kinds of things. And I just want to know. In the Hadith in Bukhari, volume 4, number 543, narrated by Abu Hurairah, the Prophet said, Allah created Adam, making him 60 cubits tall. That is the height of a 3-story building plus. Do you really believe, and do you expect me to believe, that Adam was 90 feet tall? Personally, I believe there was an Adam. But I don't believe he was 90 feet tall, because he's the first man, and we would have inherited his DNA, and we would be 90 feet tall. But your religion says he was 90 feet tall. Do you really believe that? I don't believe that. But please explain to me why it is you feel I should believe it. We read in the Hadith, Bukhari, volume 3, number 658, narrated Aisha, a man called Labid bin al-Asam from the tribe of Bani Zarek worked magic on Allah's apostle until Allah's apostle began imagining that he had done a thing that had not really been done. Bukhari, volume 7, number 660 says, narrated again by Aisha, magic was worked on Allah's apostle so that he used to think that he had sexual relations with his wives when he actually had not. He's under the effect of magic or witchcraft. Bukhari, volume 7, number 661, narrated by Aisha, magic was worked on Allah's apostle so that he began to imagine that he'd done something, although he had not. How can you be sure in the historicity of Mohammed and the deeds attributed to him when the Hadith says he used to go around thinking he did things that he didn't? As if he was senile, only it was not senility, it says he was bewitched. When your own literature says, because of some kind of occult or magical or witchcraft practice, he imagined he did things he didn't, how can you be sure he did anything? It's a fair question. If somebody came into court with senile dementia, they would not be a credible witness in a trial. The Hadith, Bukhari, volume 9, number 130, one day the Prophet visited her, the wife of Ubana bin Asamit, and she provided him with food and began looking for the lice in his head. I have no problem with saying Muhammad was human. We call them kinim to this day. Lice are prevalent in the Middle East. Anybody can get lice in the Middle East because of the climate and the habitat. Muhammad was human. But there are things I would still find difficult to believe any human would do, let alone teach others to do. According to the Hadith, Bukhari, volume 1, number 234, the Prophet ordered them to go to the herd of camels to drink their milk and urine. Mohammed told people to drink camel urine? Do you really think people should do that? Do you think drinking camel urine is a good instruction? Well, I like milk. I like soft drinks. I like fruit juices. But no matter how thirsty I was, I don't think I'd be able to follow Muhammad's instruction. Please explain to me why I should. There's a lot of things like this. Mohammed said hell is populated mainly by women. Bukhari, volume 1, number 28, the Prophet said, I was shown the hellfire and that the majority of its dwellers were women who were ungrateful. Bukhari, volume 1, number 301, Allah's apostle said, O women, give alms, as I have seen that the majority of the dwellers of hellfire were you women. I've not seen anyone more deficient in intelligence and religion than you. Bukhari, volume 2, number 161, the Prophet then said, I also saw the hellfire, and I had never seen such a horrible sight. I saw that most of the inhabitants were women. The Judeo-Christian faith teaches all have sinned, all fall short of the glory of God. None is righteous, no, not one. That is why we believe that Jesus went to the cross to pay the price for our sin. It doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man. If you have not accepted Jesus' atonement for your sin, you will go to hell. Being a woman has nothing to do with it. Being an Asian has nothing to do with it. Being a Jew has nothing to do with it. Being an Arab has nothing to do with it. Being a black African has nothing to do with it. Being an Eskimo has nothing to do with it. All have sinned, all fall short of the glory of God. We are all going to hell until and unless we put our faith in Jesus and ask Him to forgive us. Now, your religion says hell is mainly populated by women? That would mean heaven is mainly populated by men. You see, the New Testament says we can have the assurance of salvation. Mohammed did not know what Allah, God, his God, would do to him on the judgment day. The Bukhari, volume 5, number 266, the Prophet said, by Allah, even though I am the apostle of Allah, yet I do not know what Allah will do to me. If Mohammed didn't know if he was going to heaven, how can you be sure you're going to go to heaven? Now, there are fundamentalist Muslims who teach the assurance of salvation as in being shahadi, dying in a jihad. That's why they, well, in some cases, fundamentalists raise their children to be suicide bombers. They believe, of course, they'll get the 70 virgins and all this stuff. That's the assurance of salvation according to some fundamentalists. I don't say all Muslims necessarily agree. Some don't. But all Muslims must agree with the Hadith or they wouldn't be Muslims, and Mohammed said he didn't know what was going to happen to him when he met his Maker. Now, the New Testament teaches we can have the assurance of salvation if we put our faith in Jesus. That although all have sinned, all fall short of the glory of God, we can sing, bold I approach the eternal throne and claim the crown through Christ my own. Rabbi Shaul of Tarsus, St. Paul the Apostle said, I have run the good race, I have fought the good fight, hence I know there's laid up for me a crown of righteousness. Christianity says you can have the assurance of salvation. Mohammed said he didn't. If I had a choice between a faith that says I can have the assurance of salvation and one that says I can't, even its founder couldn't, why should I believe that religion unless it was true? But if it is true, can I ask you a question? In the Hadith, Bukhari, volume 2, number 167, the sun eclipsed and the prophet jumped up terrified that it might be the hour of judgments. Why was he afraid of an eclipse? I mean, there are things that are indeed very strange. Let's talk a little bit more about the scientific basis of the Scripture. The Judeo-Christian Scriptures warn people not to inbreed, not to have incestuous relationships within families. That was known long before genetic science. God knew things and said, don't inbreed, and of course we know that when people do inbreed, they are going to procreate children that will be much more predisposed to congenital illness, long before we knew about genetic science. If that same God is the God of the Koran, he should know the same things as the God of the Bible. So they asked Mohammed, why does a child resemble its father, and why does it resemble his maternal uncle? Allah's apostle said, Gabriel just now told me of their answers. And Abdullah said, he from among all the angels is the enemy of the Jews. Well, not according to the New Testament, but that's what the Hadith teaches. Bukhari, volume 4, number 546. Allah's apostle said the following: as for the resemblance of the child to its parents, if a man has sexual intercourse with his wife and reaches his climax first, the child will resemble the father. If the woman experiences sexual orgasm first, the child will resemble her. That accounts for which parent the kid's going to look like? That is what your religion teaches. Now, God understands about X and Y chromosomes. He understood about recombinant DNA before Watson and Crick. In fact, God invented recombinant DNA. It was his idea. Scientifically, there's another explanation. And biblically, before we knew about recombinant DNA, God was warning people about certain things like genetically transmitted disease. That is what accounts for resemblance. A terrible drought came upon the Thamud people. Allah made a she-camel grow out of the mountain. As a sign from Allah, the camel preached to the people. But the wicked Thamud people hamstrung the camel and slew her. So Allah sent an earthquake and destroyed the Thamud people. Surah, volume 7, verse 73. Surah, volume 7, verse 77. Surah 54, verse 23. Surah 54:27. Surah 54:29. Surah 54:30 to 31. Now, this is not really something I would have a hard time accepting, because God did speak through Balaam's donkey. I believe the donkey did talk. But do you really believe a camel preached to people? And if people saw a camel talking, they would hamstring it and kill it? I mean, they might sell tickets. I don't know. No dogs or cats allowed. Bukhari, volume 4, numbers 539 in the Hadith. Angels do not enter a house which has either a dog or a picture of it. Bukhari, volume 4, number 540, narrated Abdullah bin Umar, Allah's apostle, ordered that dogs should be killed. Muslim, volume 1, number 551. Ibn Mukhafal reported the messenger of Allah ordered the killing of dogs and then said, what about them, other dogs? And he granted concessions to keep the dog for hunting and the dog for the herd, and said, when a dog licks the utensils, wash it 7 times and rub it with dirt the 8th time. But then, in Muslim, volume 1, number 552, it goes on. It's not only dogs. Cats are then forbidden. They got to understand something. In the third world today, when you don't have dogs and cats, guess what you have instead? Rats, bubonic plague, children being bitten, rabies. You know about the Great Plague of London? Why did that happen? Because they believed in miasmus. They believed that what was emitted by the urine of cats and dogs was causing the plague. In fact, it was the fleas traveling on the backs of rats. So they drove the dogs and cats out of London, not knowing that the stench of the urine was a deterrent to rats, because they're naturally inimical species. And as they got rid of the dogs and the cats, people died in London in droves because of plague. The rat population multiplied. Yet when the Iranian fundamentalists took power in Iran under Khomeini, people had to get rid of their house pets if they were dogs or cats. Medieval Europe did not understand medical science or infectious disease properly. They believed in miasmus. They didn't know about bacteria or viral infection or prions. They didn't know about the fleas on the backs of the rats. And it was the dogs and cats who kept the rat population down. Later they found out. But God should have known it all along, if he was God. I could go on and on and on and on and on. The prophet and the Ethiopians, black people, even in Hebrew, the word for an Ethiopian is the same as the word for a black person, Kushi. Bukhari, volume 1, number 662, narrated Anas, the prophet said, an Ethiopian who was a raisin head. While in Mecca, the angel Gabriel opened up the chest of Allah with a knife. And the angel washed his organs in a container of water from the well of Zamzam and brought golden vials filled with wisdom and faith and poured it into Muhammad's chest after cleansing his organs. Look, you can believe this stuff. I just don't. I don't believe it's right to own slaves. I don't believe that the sun gets tired every night and sets into a miry bog. I don't believe that Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Miriam, the sister of Moses, are the same woman with 13 centuries between them. I don't believe non-Muslims have 7 sets of intestines. I don't believe people should drink camel urine. I just don't believe it. I'm not out to attack you. I'm out to understand you. I'm not out to attack your religion. I'm out to understand your religion. I just cannot believe a 54-year-old man having sex with a little girl is the prophet. I just can't believe it. No, I'm not blaspheming Islam. I'm quoting Islam. No, Judge Michael Higgins, I am not vilifying Islam. I'm reading its literature. I'm not out to offend anybody. I'm simply reading what you people claim to believe. And I can't believe it. In fact, I don't understand how you can believe it. I have read Islamic scholars called Orientalists who admit they don't believe it. Please show me why anyone should believe it. Salim.